The alarm bells rang across the massive space station that floated above SciFiPrime. Inside the great meeting hall, aliens from every corner of the galaxy sat in their special chairs, each one designed for their different body types. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed with soft light. But today, fear showed on every face. Ambassador Kethvar stood at the center of the room. His blue skin looked pale, and his hands shook as he held the data pad. The news he carried would change everything. "The Void Swarm has broken through our best defenses," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. 17 star systems are gone. Just gone. If they keep moving this fast, they will reach our home worlds in 50 days. The room erupted in panic. Voices rose in dozens of languages, some high and musical, others deep and rumbling. The Altarians flapped their wing-like arms. The crystalline beings made sounds like breaking glass. Everyone was afraid. Far away near the edge of known space, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the Titan's Reach. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. For 10 years he had patrolled these empty regions of space, far from the important trade routes and busy planets. The galactic powers kept humans out here, away from their precious civilizations. "Captain," called Lieutenant Lisa Chen from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and quick fingers that danced over her controls. "We're getting a signal. It's from the Galactic Council." Morrison raised an eyebrow. In all his years of service, the Council had never contacted his ship directly. They usually pretended humans didn't exist. "Put it through," he said. The main screen flickered to life, showing Ambassador Kethvar's worried face. Behind him, Morrison could see the chaos of the Council chambers. "To all human vessels," Kethvar began, "the galaxy faces a threat unlike any we have encountered. The Void Swarm consumes everything in its path. Our fleets cannot stop it. Our weapons do not work. We need your help." Lisa looked up at Morrison with wide eyes. "Sir, did he just ask us for help?" Morrison nodded slowly. For decades, the other species had called humans Deathworlders. They said Earth was too dangerous, too violent. They said humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable. The Council had placed limits on human expansion, keeping them in the outer regions where they couldn't contaminate galactic civilization. The transmission continued. More data flowed across the screens, showing the path of destruction the swarm had left behind. Entire solar systems reduced to empty space. Billions of lives lost. The images were horrible. "The swarm appeared 6 months ago," Kethvar explained. "It came from the dark space between galaxies. Our scientists believe it is not natural. Someone or something created it as a weapon, but it has escaped control." Morrison watched the tactical data. The swarm moved like a living thing, flowing from system to system. When it reached a planet, it didn't just destroy the buildings or kill the people. It consumed everything, leaving not even dust behind. "They eat energy itself," continued the ambassador. "They absorb the life force of entire worlds. Our people become part of the swarm, their minds linked to some terrible central intelligence." The captain studied the attack patterns. Every species in the galaxy had tried to fight the swarm using traditional tactics. Coordinated fleet movements, precise targeting, calculated strategies. All had failed. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "look at this." She pointed to her screen, which showed the current position of human ships throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of vessels scattered across the outer rim, all considered too dangerous to allow near civilized space. Morrison smiled grimly. The same qualities that made other species fear humans might be exactly what was needed now. "Send a message to Earth Fleet Command," he ordered. "Tell them the galaxy is calling for the Deathworlders." As the Titan's Reach changed course toward the inner systems, Morrison thought about irony. For so long, humanity had been kept at arm's length, treated like dangerous children who might break something valuable. Now, those same galactic powers were begging for help from the species they had rejected. The Void Swarm had made one crucial mistake. It had learned to fight every known species in the galaxy, adapting to their tactics and strategies. But it had never encountered humans before. It had never faced a species that thrived on chaos, that found strength in unpredictability. Back on SciFiPrime, Ambassador Kethavar finished his desperate plea and closed the transmission. Around him, the various species continued their panicked discussions. Some worried that bringing humans into the fight would make things worse. Others argued that they had no choice. "What if they refuse to help?" asked one delegate, a tall being covered in silver fur. "What if they demand payment we cannot afford?" worried another. Kethavar looked out through the station's great windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the swarm continued its advance, consuming everything in its path. And somewhere else, human ships were beginning to move, carrying with them the galaxy's last hope. He had studied humans for years, trying to understand these strange beings from their violent world. They fought each other constantly, yet came together when facing outside threats. They were emotional and unpredictable, yet capable of incredible bravery. They created beautiful art and terrible weapons with equal skill. Perhaps those contradictions, those very qualities that made other species nervous, would be enough to stop the unstoppable swarm. The fate of the galaxy now rested with the Deathworlders. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the war room of the New Yorktown, the largest ship in the human fleet. Around her, holographic displays showed the movement of hundreds of vessels converging from across the galaxy. Ships that had been scattered to the far corners of space were now coming together for the biggest military operation in human history. Kate was 52 years old, with silver streaks in her brown hair and scars on her hands from years of service. She had started as a pilot on a small patrol ship and worked her way up through the ranks. The other species had never taken her seriously because she was human, but that was about to change. "Admiral," called Commander Ryan Baker from his station. He was a stocky man with a thick beard who had served with Kate for 8 years. "We have reports coming in from all sectors. The Pacific Fleet is 3 days out. The Atlantic Squadron will arrive tomorrow. Even the Deep Space Patrol groups are abandoning their posts to join us." Kate nodded as she studied the numbers. 237 ships in total. It was every major vessel humanity had, pulled from patrol duties, exploration missions, and guard positions throughout the Outer Rim. 15 massive dreadnoughts, 42 heavy cruisers, and dozens of smaller ships filled with fighters and marines. The irony was not lost on her. For 30 years, the Galactic Council had restricted human expansion. They said humans were too aggressive, too violent for peaceful space. Earth's military was limited to the outer regions, far from the important trade routes and wealthy systems. Now those same council members were offering everything they had once denied. "What are they promising us?" Kate asked her diplomatic officer. "Full council membership," the woman replied, reading from her pad. "Access to their best technology, territorial rights in the inner systems. Some species are even offering cultural exchange programs." Kate almost laughed. Cultural exchange with species that had spent decades calling humans barbarians. But the situation was too serious for humor. Captain Alex Turner arrived from the heavy cruiser Defiant with his tactical team. Alex was younger than Kate, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and quick movements. His ship had been scouting the edge of swarm territory for the past week. "Admiral, you need to see this," he said, activating a portable hologram unit. The image showed a group of alien refugees, their ship damaged and their faces filled with terror. "These are Altarians who escaped from the Kepler system," Alex explained. "The swarm didn't just destroy their world. It changed the people." The hologram shifted to show security footage from the refugee ship. Kate watched as the rescued Altarians moved in perfect coordination, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They spoke in unison, their voices flat and emotionless. "The swarm takes over their minds," Alex continued. "It connects them to some kind of central intelligence. They lose everything that made them individuals." Dr. Nina Rodriguez joined the briefing. She was the fleet's top expert on alien biology, a small woman with gray hair and intense green eyes. She had been studying the swarm's attack patterns since the first reports came in. The entity learns from each species it encounters, she explained, bringing up her research on the main display. It adapts their technology, their tactics, even their biology. That's why it's been so successful against the established galactic powers. Kate studied the data. The swarm had fought the logical, coordinated Altarians and learned to think like them. It had faced the precise mathematical crystalline beings and copied their patterns. Each victory made it stronger and smarter. But it's never fought humans. Before, Nina continued, and Kate could hear excitement in her voice. Our neural patterns are completely different from any other known species. We're chaotic, emotional, unpredictable. The swarm might not be able to adapt to us the same way. Commander Baker leaned forward. You're saying our biggest weakness might be our strength? Exactly, Nina replied. Every other species fights with careful planning and logical tactics. Humans fight with instinct and emotion. We make decisions that don't make sense to outside observers. Kate thought about her own career. How many times had she succeeded by doing something that contradicted military doctrine? How many battles had been won by human commanders who trusted their gut instead of their computers? There's something else, Alex added. The refugees told us about the swarm's command structure. It's not just a hive mind. There's a central intelligence that controls everything. If we could find it, disrupt it somehow, we might be able to stop the whole thing, Kate finished. Over the next day, ships continued to arrive. Kate watched from the observation deck as vessel after vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The sight was both beautiful and sobering. Every ship represented a community somewhere that was now undefended, but they had all come anyway. Captain Morrison's Titan's Reach was among the arrivals. Kate had known Jake for 15 years, and she was glad to have his experience. The Outer Rim patrol captains like him understood how to fight against impossible odds. The final pre-battle briefing took place in the New York town's main auditorium. Hundreds of human officers filled the seats, their faces serious but determined. These were people who had been told their whole careers that they weren't good enough for the inner systems, that their aggressive nature made them unsuitable for civilized space. The galaxy called us Deathworlders, Kate told them, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. They said we were too violent, too chaotic for their peaceful civilization. They kept us in the outer darkness where we couldn't contaminate. Their perfect order. She paused, looking out at the faces before her. These were her people, forged by a harsh world and hardened by years of being treated as outcasts. Now that perfect order is being destroyed by something that feeds on predictability, she continued. The swarm has beaten every logical, coordinated force sent against it. But we're not logical, we're not coordinated, we're human. The room erupted in cheers. Not the polite applause of a diplomatic meeting, but the raw, emotional response of warriors ready for battle. The enemy thinks it knows how to fight, Kate concluded. It's about to learn what happens when you mess with Deathworlders. As the briefing ended and the officers returned to their ships, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since joining the military, humanity was fighting for something bigger than themselves. They weren't just defending Earth or protecting human interests. They were standing up for every living thing in the galaxy. The swarm had made a mistake. It had learned to fight every known species except one. Now it was about to face the chaotic, unpredictable, utterly human response to existential threat, and Kate Sullivan was ready to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could do. Captain Jake Morrison gripped the arms of his command chair as the Titan's Reach shuddered under enemy fire. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, their faces lit by the red glow of emergency lighting. Through the main view screen, he could see something that would haunt his dreams forever. The swarm ships didn't look like any vessels he had ever seen. They were organic, living things that pulsed with veins of light running along their hulls. The smallest were the size of fighters moving like angry insects through space. The largest stretched for kilometers, their surfaces rippling like skin as they breathed in the vacuum. Evasive maneuvers, Morrison shouted as his ship bucked again. A beam of energy that bent space itself had just missed them by meters. Lieutenant, Lisa Chen hunched over her communications console. trying to maintain contact with the rest of the scouting force. "Sir, I'm losing contact with the other ships. Their weapons are doing something to our signals." The human fleet had sent 12 ships to investigate reports of swarm activity at the Helios Junction. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission. Get in, take readings, get out. But the swarm had been waiting for them. "Captain," called Lieutenant Commander Paul Grant from the tactical station, "I'm reading 57 enemy contacts and climbing. They just keep coming out of that asteroid field." Morrison studied the tactical display. The swarm ships moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. Every movement was calculated, every attack precisely timed. They fought, like a computer program made flesh. "Launch fighters," he ordered. "Tell our pilots to break formation and attack individually." "Sir?" Grant looked confused. Military doctrine called for coordinated fighter attacks, not individual assaults. "You heard me. Tell them to ignore the tactical manual. I want them to be as unpredictable as possible." The Titan's Reach fighters launched from the hangar bay in tight formation, then immediately scattered in all directions. Each pilot chose their own target and approach. To an outside observer, it looked like chaos. And that's exactly what Morrison wanted. The swarm's response was immediate but confused. Their ships, which had been moving with perfect precision moments before, began to hesitate. Their formation wavered as they tried to predict the humans' next moves. "It's working," Grant reported, excitement in his voice. "The enemy formation is breaking up. They can't figure out what we're going to do next." One of the human pilots, Lieutenant Sam Davis, had been a test pilot before joining the military. He flew his fighter in patterns that defied physics and common sense, rolling and spinning through space in moves that should have been impossible. The swarm ships pursuing him kept overshooting their targets, unable to predict his next maneuver. "This is incredible," Davis reported over the comm. "They're trying to anticipate my moves, but I don't even know what I'm going to do next." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. For years, human pilots had been criticized for their reckless flying styles. Military advisors from other species had tried to teach them proper formation flying and coordinated tactics. Now that chaotic approach was saving their lives. But the battle was far from over. More swarm ships emerged from the asteroid field, these ones larger and more dangerous. Morrison watched as one of them, a vessel the size of a small moon, turned its attention to his ship. "All power to shields," he ordered. "Lisa, send a message to Admiral Sullivan. Tell her we found them, and they're not like anything we've faced before." The massive swarm ship fired a weapon that Morrison couldn't even categorize. It wasn't energy or projectiles, but something that reached into the Titan's Reach and tried to change it from the inside. The ship's hull began to ripple and shift as if it were becoming organic. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, reported the damage control officer. "But sir, it's not a normal breach. The hull is growing." Morrison made a decision that went against everything he had been taught. Instead of trying to contain the breach, he ordered explosive charges set throughout the affected areas. "You want to blow holes in our own ship?" Grant asked. "The swarm is trying to convert our ship into one of theirs," Morrison explained. "We're going to help it along, then use our backup systems to blow the converted sections into space." It was a crazy plan that should have destroyed the Titan's Reach. Instead, it worked perfectly. The converted sections of the ship were ejected into space, taking with them whatever alien intelligence had been trying to take control. The remaining human systems sealed the gaps and continued functioning. The swarm ship that had attacked them actually pulled back as if confused by the humans' response. Its kind had never encountered a species that would damage their own vessel to deny the enemy an advantage. Lieutenant Commander Grant was monitoring the tactical situation when he noticed something important. "Captain, the swarm's coordination is breaking down. Our unpredictable tactics are disrupting their formation." Morrison looked at the display. The enemy ships, which had moved like a single organism at the start of the battle, were now operating as individuals. They were still dangerous, but they had lost their overwhelming advantage of perfect coordination. "All ships, this is Morrison," he broadcast to the scattered human vessels. "Attack pattern chaos. I repeat, attack pattern chaos. Do whatever you want, just don't do what they expect." The response was immediate. Human ships throughout the battle zone abandoned their training and relied on instinct. Captain Susan Wells of the destroyer Lightning made attack runs that violated basic physics. Commander Tom Baker of the frigate Defender used his ship's cargo bay as an improvised weapon, launching supply containers at enemy vessels. Lieutenant Rodriguez flew her reconnaissance ship through the middle of enemy formations, disrupting their targeting systems. The swarm, which had been advancing steadily, suddenly found itself in retreat. For the first time since its rampage began, the unstoppable force had been stopped. "They're pulling back," Lisa reported, disbelief in her voice. "Sir, the entire swarm formation is withdrawing." Morrison watched as the organic ships began to move away from the battle zone. It wasn't a rout, but it was definitely a retreat. The hive mind controlling them had encountered something it couldn't understand, and its response was to withdraw and reassess. Dr. Nina Rodriguez's voice came over the comm from the research vessel Discovery. "Captain Morrison, I've been monitoring the swarm's biological signatures. Their neural patterns went completely chaotic when your forces started acting unpredictably. I think we found their weakness." As the human ships regrouped and began treating their wounded, Morrison felt a mixture of pride and amazement. His small scouting force had accomplished something that entire galactic fleets had failed to do. They had made the swarm retreat. "Lisa, send a full report to Admiral Sullivan," he ordered. "Tell her we found the enemy's weakness. They can adapt to any logical strategy, but they can't handle pure human chaos." The battle at Helios Junction lasted only 3 hours, but it changed the course of the war. For the first time, the galaxy had hope. The unstoppable swarm could be stopped, but only by embracing the very qualities that had made humanity outcasts in civilized space. The Deathworlders had found their purpose. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched through the bridge windows of the New York town as her fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel above the planet Valterra. What she saw made her heart sink. The beautiful crystalline world was under siege. Massive, energy barriers surrounded the planet's cities, glowing shields that held back the advancing swarm. But even from orbit, Kate could see that the barriers were failing. Dark patches spread across their surfaces like infections, and through the gaps organic swarm vessels poured toward the helpless population below. "Admiral," Commander Ryan Baker reported from his station, "we're receiving desperate signals from the planet's surface. The Valtheran defenders are requesting immediate assistance." Kate studied the tactical display. The swarm had committed enormous resources to this attack. Hundreds of their bioships circled the planet like vultures, while smaller vessels darted between the energy barriers like parasites seeking weak points. "Captain Turner," she called to the commander of the Defiant, "take your assault group and begin orbital strikes on the largest swarm vessels. Commander Baker, coordinate with the planet's defense grid. I want our ships integrated into their shield network." "Yes, ma'am," both officers replied. But Kate had a special mission in mind for the ground forces. "Captain Lisa Chang," she called to the commander of the Special Operations Transport Vessel Ranger. "Prepare your teams for planetary insertion. We're going behind enemy lines." Captain Chang was a small woman with quick eyes and steady hands. She had grown up in the asteroid mining colonies where every day was a fight for survival. Her Special Forces team was made up of similar people, humans who thrived in dangerous situations. "What's the mission, Admiral?" Chang asked. "The swarm has established forward bases on the planet's surface," Kate explained, bringing up intelligence data on the main screen. "They're using these bases to coordinate their attacks on the city shields. We need to disrupt them from the inside." As the human fleet engaged the swarm vessels in orbit, Dr. Nina Rodriguez made a discovery that changed everything. She had been monitoring the biological signatures of the swarm forces when she noticed something odd about their interaction with human personnel. "Admiral," she called from her research station, "I need to show you something important." Nina brought up readings from the battle at Helios Junction. The data showed brain scans of human pilots during combat, compared with similar readings from other species who had fought the swarm. "Look at these neural patterns," she said, pointing to the chaotic waves on the human brain scans. "When we're under stress, our minds produce a type of electrical activity that the other species don't have. Kate studied the data. What does that mean? The swarm controls other species by linking into their neural networks, Nina explained. But our chaotic brain patterns seem to interfere with that process. When humans get excited or angry or scared, we become essentially immune to their mental influence. This was huge news. Kate immediately understood the implications. So the more chaotic we act, the less they can affect us? Exactly. And there's more, Nina continued. I think our emotional responses might actually be painful to the hive mind. Every time a human feels strong emotions, it creates static in their collective consciousness. Captain Chang's voice came over the comm from the Ranger. Admiral, we're approaching the drop zone. Request permission to begin operations. Permission granted, Kate replied. And Chang, I want your people to remember something. Don't try to be professional down there. Be as human as possible. The transport ship Ranger descended through Valthera's atmosphere under heavy fire. Chang watched through the windows as swarm vessels pursued them, their organic hulls pulsing with hostile intent. But her pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, flew, the ship with the same chaotic style that had worked so well in space. Hang on, Webb called as he threw the ship into a spin that should have torn it apart. The swarm fighters, trying to predict his course, flew into each other instead. Chang's team hit the ground running. 24 of the best Special Forces soldiers humanity had to offer, armed with weapons designed for maximum chaos rather than precision. They had studied the swarm's tactics and learned that the enemy relied on predictable responses from their opponents. So they gave them the opposite. Sergeant Tom Wilson led his squad through the ruins of a Valtheraean city using tactics that would have horrified military instructors. They moved without formation, attacked without coordination, and made decisions based on instinct rather than strategy. The swarm forces trying to track them couldn't predict their movements. This is incredible, Wilson reported over the comm. The enemy keeps setting up ambushes where they think we're going to be, but we're never there because we don't know where we're going either. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain Turner's assault group was learning the same lesson. The Defiant and her sister ships engaged the massive swarm biovessels using human tactics that made no logical sense. They fired at targets they couldn't hit, maneuvered into positions that offered no tactical advantage, and generally acted like they had no idea what they were doing. And it was working perfectly. The enemy fleet is in complete disarray, Turner reported to Admiral Sullivan. They keep trying to counter our moves, but our moves don't make sense to counter. On the planet's surface, Captain Chang's team reached their target, a massive organic structure that the swarm was using as a command center. The building looked like a cross between a beehive and a brain, with pulsing veins running along its walls and strange lights flickering in its windows. All right, people, Chang told her team. Remember what Dr. Rodriguez said. Let's give them a dose of human chaos. What followed was the strangest military assault in recorded history. Instead of coordinated tactical strikes, Chang's soldiers attacked the swarm base using pure emotional fury. They screamed war cries from Earth's ancient battles, played loud music from their armor speakers, and fought with a savage joy that confused and disrupted the hive mind's control. Corporal Jane Addams, a former street fighter from Earth's urban zones, discovered that her combat style was particularly effective against swarm warriors. They tried to predict her moves based on military training, but her technique came from years of surviving in places where there were no rules. They can't handle real fighting, she reported as she smashed through a group of converted aliens. They only know how to fight soldiers, not street fighters. The effect on the swarm was dramatic. Chang watched through her tactical display as the enemy's coordination began to break down across the entire planet. The hive mind, overwhelmed by chaotic human emotions and unpredictable tactics, was losing control of its forces. Back in orbit, Admiral Sullivan received reports from battles across the system. Human forces were achieving victories that should have been impossible, simply by embracing their chaotic nature instead of fighting against it. Engineer Marcus Webb, working with Valtherian scientists, made another breakthrough. By combining human unpredictability with alien precision, they created hybrid weapons that the swarm couldn't adapt to. The weapons changed their function randomly, shifting from energy beams to projectile weapons to electromagnetic pulses without warning. The key is randomness, Webb explained to the alien scientists. Your technology is perfect, but perfection is predictable. Our technology is chaotic, but chaos can't be countered. As the battle for Valthera reached its climax, the swarm made a critical error. Faced with defeats across multiple fronts, the hive mind tried to focus its full attention on the human forces. But human consciousness, with all its chaos and emotion, was like a virus in their collective network. Dr. Rodriguez watched her instruments with growing excitement. Admiral, the swarm's neural network is destabilizing. Our emotional responses are creating feedback loops in their system. The end came suddenly. The massive swarm bioships in orbit began to drift aimlessly as their coordination collapsed. On the planet's surface, the converted aliens under swarm control simply stopped fighting and stood motionless, as if awakening from a dream. Captain Chung's team secured the swarm command center and found something remarkable inside. The organic computer that had been coordinating the attack was covered in strange growths that pulsed with chaotic energy. It looked almost like a brain having a seizure. It can't process us, Chang reported to Admiral Sullivan. The hive mind literally can't understand how we think. As Valthera's defenders emerged from their hiding places and began celebrating their liberation, Admiral Sullivan realized that humanity had found something more valuable than victory. They had found their purpose in the galaxy. The qualities that made other species fear humans, their chaos and unpredictability and emotional intensity, were exactly what was needed to fight this ancient enemy. For the first time since joining the galactic community, humans were not just tolerated but desperately needed. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's salvation. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood before the largest military formation in galactic history. Through the observation deck of the New Yorktown, she could see thousands of ships stretching to the horizon of space. Human vessels flew alongside Altarian, cruisers, crystalline defense platforms, and ships from dozens of other species. For the first time ever, the galaxy was truly united. Admiral, Commander Ryan Baker reported, all fleet elements are in position. Total count, 3,412 vessels from 47 different species. Kate nodded, but her attention was focused on what lay ahead. The nexus of stars was a gravitational anomaly unlike anything else in known space, where multiple star systems had been pulled together by cosmic forces, and at its center, the swarm had built its ultimate weapon. The structure was enormous, larger than most planets. It pulsed with organic life, growing new ships like fruit on a tree. Streams of energy flowed between its sections, carrying information and resources to fuel the swarm's expansion across the galaxy. That's where it all started, Dr. Nina Rodriguez said, joining Kate at the observation window. The central intelligence that controls the entire swarm is in there somewhere. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the comm from the Titan's reach. Admiral, we're detecting massive movement from the Nexus. Looks like they know we're here. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Bioships the size of small moons emerged from the Nexus, supported by swarms of smaller vessels that numbered in the millions. It was the largest concentration of swarm forces ever seen, and it should have been impossible to defeat. But Kate had learned something important over the past months. Impossible was just another word for hasn't been tried by humans yet. All ships, she broadcast to the massive fleet. This is Admiral Sullivan. Today we face the source of the galaxy's nightmares. The swarm thinks it knows how to fight, because it has defeated every logical, coordinated force sent against it. But we're not just another coordinated force. She paused, looking out at the mix of species that had come together to fight. Each one had contributed something unique to the battle plan. Altarian precision, crystalline mathematics, Valtheraean energy manipulation, and human chaos. We're going to show this ancient enemy what happens when the galaxy's children work together, she continued. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and let's end this threat forever. The battle began immediately. Swarm bioships charged toward the Allied fleet with their usual perfect coordination. But this time they faced something they had never encountered. A truly mixed force that combined multiple fighting styles. Captain Morrison commanded a squadron, of mixed human and alien ships, demonstrating how Deathworlder tactics could be adapted for cooperative warfare. Instead of rigid formations, the combined fleet moved like a living organism, each ship responding to threats with violent creativity. "This is working better than I expected," Morrison reported as his mixed squadron tore through a group of swarm vessels. "The aliens are learning to fight chaotically, and we're learning to coordinate our chaos." But the real breakthrough came from Dr. Rodriguez. She had been working for weeks on a project that seemed impossible, finding a way to use human consciousness as a weapon against the swarm's hive mind. "Admiral," she called from her research station, "I'm ready to attempt the neural feedback attack, but I need every human in the fleet to participate." Kate understood immediately. "You want to link all our minds together?" "Through the ship communication systems, yes," Nina explained. "If we can create a massive surge of chaotic human consciousness and direct it at the swarm's central intelligence, it might disrupt their entire network." It was the craziest plan Kate had ever heard. It was also perfectly human. "All human vessels," she broadcast, "prepare for neural link. We're going to give the swarm a taste of what it's like inside a human mind." Across the fleet, human crew members connected their personal communicators to their ship's main systems. Thousands of chaotic, emotional, unpredictable human minds began to link together through the technological network. The result was unlike anything in galactic history. Captain Lisa Chang, leading ground assault teams against swarm installations, felt the connection form in her mind. Suddenly she could sense the thoughts and emotions of humans throughout the fleet. But instead of becoming a hive mind like the swarm, they remained individuals. Their chaos multiplied rather than organized. "This is incredible," she reported. "I can feel everyone, but we're still ourselves. It's like controlled chaos." The effect on the swarm was immediate and devastating. The bioships that had been advancing in perfect formation suddenly began to drift aimlessly. Their coordination collapsed as the chaotic human consciousness crashed into their hive mind like a mental tsunami. Captain Alex Turner, commanding the assault on the Nexus itself, led his boarding teams through biomechanical corridors that pulsed with alien life. What they found at the center was both terrifying and strangely familiar. The swarm's central intelligence was a massive organic computer, a brain the size of a building that had been trying to impose order on a chaotic universe. It had consumed thousands of species, absorbing their knowledge and their patterns, always seeking perfect control, and now it was dying, overwhelmed by the one type of consciousness it could never understand or control. "It's beautiful in a way," Turner reported as his team secured the central chamber. "It was trying to create perfect order, but life isn't supposed to be perfectly ordered." As the central intelligence failed, its control over the swarm forces collapsed. Across dozens of star systems, bioships simply stopped functioning. Converted aliens found themselves free for the first time in months, their minds their own again. The battle for the Nexus lasted 12 hours, but the war was effectively over in the first few minutes, when the linked human consciousness proved that chaos could defeat any form of imposed order. In the aftermath, Admiral Sullivan found herself in a very different galaxy than the one she had known. Ambassador Kethavar arrived aboard the New Yorktown with an official delegation from the Galactic Council, but this time they came as equals rather than desperate supplicants. "Admiral Sullivan," Kethavar said, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally offer humanity full membership and equal status in our civilization." Kate looked out at the mixed fleet that surrounded them, ships from dozens of species working together to clean up the remnants of the swarm threat. "With respect, Ambassador, I think we're past the point of you offering us membership. We're all members of the same galaxy now." Captain Morrison, back aboard the Titan's Reach, received communication from Earthfleet Command. The message was brief. "Well done. Come home when you're ready." But Morrison wasn't sure where home was anymore. For decades, humans had been kept on the edges of galactic civilization. Now they were an essential part of it, guardians of the chaos that made life possible. Dr. Rodriguez published her findings about the neural feedback technique, sharing the discovery with scientists throughout the galaxy. Other species began studying human consciousness, trying to understand how chaos and emotion could be sources of strength rather than weakness. Engineer Marcus Webb worked with teams from multiple species to reverse engineer swarm technology, turning their biomechanical innovations into tools for creation rather than destruction. The hybrid technologies that emerged would transform galactic civilization. As the combined fleet began to disperse, returning to their home systems, Kate realized that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate species maintaining careful distance from each other. It was a community, united by the shared experience of facing extinction and choosing to fight together. The swarm had been created as a weapon to impose order through destruction. Instead, it had brought about something its creators never intended: true unity through diversity. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Titan's Reach as his ship prepared to return to patrol duties. But these wouldn't be the lonely patrols of the Outer Rim anymore. Human ships would serve alongside alien vessels throughout the galaxy, sharing their chaotic wisdom and learning from other species in return. The universe had called for aid, and the Deathworlders had answered. In doing so, they had found their place among the stars not as conquerors or outcasts, but as guardians of the beautiful chaos that made life worth living. And in the deep space between galaxies, where the swarm had first emerged, something new was stirring. Not another weapon of destruction, but the seeds of new life, growing in the fertile chaos that the united galaxy now protected. The age of perfect order was over. The age of beautiful chaos had begun.